When you and the narcissistic, emotionally indifferent woman both stop reaching out, something quietly shifts. No one announces it. No dramatic ending. Just a pause that stretches longer than expected. The messages that once came without warning stop showing up. The calls that kept you alert fade away. Two people, each carrying their own wounds, each protecting themselves in very different ways, finally stop holding the connection together. The familiar cycle of pulling close and pushing away, of hope followed by distance, slowly collapses. At first, it feels like this silence must mean it is over. But in relationships shaped by narcissism and emotional detachment, this moment is rarely the true ending. This is where things begin to surface, because when chasing ends on both sides, what remains is not immediate peace. What remains is clarity, the kind that feels uncomfortable before it feels freeing. For a narcissistic woman, cutting off contact is rarely about hatred or total indifference. It is usually about maintaining control. Distance allows her to avoid vulnerability, avoid accountability, and avoid reopening old emotional wounds she has buried for years. But the moment you also stop reaching out, something in that carefully built emotional shield begins to crack. The silence begins. When contact stops on both sides, everything suddenly slows down. There are no late-night conversations, no sudden cold replies, no emotional swings to react to. The constant noise that once filled your head finally goes quiet. At first, that quiet can feel unsettling, almost too still, because chaos had become normal for you without you realizing it. In the beginning, your body reacts before your mind does. You might feel restless, distracted, or slightly on edge. That is because you were used to monitoring her tone, her availability, and her emotional temperature. Your system learned to stay alert, waiting for the next shift. When that stimulation disappears, it feels like something is missing, even if what is missing was hurting you. For her, the silence often feels familiar. Pulling away is something she knows how to do well. When things start to feel emotional or demanding, disappearing gives her a sense of control. She tells herself that distance equals safety. By not engaging, she avoids uncomfortable feelings and avoids having to explain herself. For you, stopping contact feels unnatural at first. You are used to being the one who checks in, smooths things over, and keeps the connection alive. When you do not do that anymore, it can trigger guilt or self-doubt. You might catch yourself thinking that you are being cold or unfair, even though you are simply stepping back. As days pass, another layer shows up. Without constant interaction, your mind starts to slow down. You notice how much mental energy used to go into reading signs and waiting for responses. The silence creates space, and that space makes certain patterns easier to see. You begin to notice how one-sided things really were. This is also when the emotional habit starts to weaken. You reach for your phone less often. You stop replaying old conversations as much. The urge to explain yourself or get reassurance slowly loses its grip. Not all at once, but enough to feel a difference. This moment matters because the cycle cannot continue without participation from both sides. When you stop reacting, fixing, and chasing, the pattern has nothing to feed on. The silence is not passive. It is active in a quiet way. It creates distance from the confusion and gives you room to breathe again. This is the first real break in the dynamic. Even if it feels uncomfortable, it is the point where change actually becomes possible. Inside the narcissistic and emotionally indifferent mind. A narcissistic an emotionally indifferent woman, does not experience connection the same way you do. For her, closeness often feels risky. It brings expectations, emotional responsibility, and the chance that someone might see through her defenses. Pulling away helps her feel back in control. Distance allows her to stay on top emotionally without having to give anything real in return. She is not comfortable with emotional balance. When a relationship starts to feel mutual, she often feels pressured. Being needed in a healthy way can feel overwhelming to her. Instead of talking things through, she creates space. Silence becomes her way of managing emotions she does not want to face or understand. In the early stage of no contact, she often feels lighter. There is no one asking how she feels or where the relationship is going. No one expecting consistency. This gives her a temporary sense of freedom. She convinces herself that this distance proves she does not need anyone, and that she is better off staying detached. Over time, that sense of relief begins to wear off. Narcissistic individuals rely heavily on attention to regulate their self-worth. When you stop reaching out, that steady source of validation slows down. She may not admit it, even to herself, but she starts to notice the change. The quiet becomes noticeable, not peaceful. She begins to feel unsettled, not because she misses emotional closeness, but because she misses being desired. Being wanted without having to reciprocate is what felt safe to her. When that dynamic disappears, she feels a loss of control. This can show up as irritation, restlessness, or sudden curiosity about what you are doing. She rarely experiences this as sadness in a clear way. Instead, it feels like something is off. Her ego notices the absence before her emotions do. She wonders why you are no longer chasing, explaining, or trying, even if she never reaches out directly. Your silence forces her to face a gap she is not used to feeling. This internal tension is uncomfortable for her because it cannot be solved through distance alone. But instead of turning inward and reflecting, she often looks for external ways to avoid the feeling. That avoidance is part of the pattern, and understanding it helps you stop taking her behavior personally. The emotional power shift. When you stop contacting her, the emotional balance does not slowly change. It shifts clearly and directly. Before, most of the effort came from you. You were explaining your feelings, adjusting your behavior, and waiting for signs that things would improve. That constant effort gave her control, even if she never said it out loud. Once you stop reaching out, that control weakens. She is no longer reacting to your messages or deciding when to reply. Instead, she is left with uncertainty. She may not like that feeling because she was used to knowing you were there, ready to respond. The predictability she relied on is gone. This change affects her sense of importance. Your attention helped confirm her value without requiring her to give much back. When that attention disappears, it creates discomfort. This is not about emotional connection for her. It is about losing a position where she felt admired, desired, or prioritized. She might try to regain that position indirectly. This can show up as checking your social media or finding small reasons to reappear. These actions are not about rebuilding the relationship in a healthy way. They are about seeing if she still has influence over your emotions. For you, the shift feels different. At first, it can feel wrong to stop chasing. You might feel like you are being distant or unfair. That reaction comes from habit, not truth. You were trained to believe that keeping things going was your responsibility. Holding your position is what completes the shift. When you do not rush to fix the discomfort, the dynamic resets. You move out of a role where you were giving more than you received. That is where real balance starts to return. Your emotional process, from pain to clarity. In the first stage of silence, your thoughts tend to loop. You remember moments that felt meaningful. You focus on times when she showed warmth or attention. Your mind tries to find proof that the connection was real and worth holding on to. As time passes, another awareness starts to surface. You begin noticing how drained you were. You see how often you questioned your own needs. You remember moments when you stayed quiet to avoid conflict or accepted behavior that did not sit right with you. This clarity does not arrive all at once. It comes in small realizations. You start seeing how much emotional effort you were putting in alone. You notice how often you waited for her to meet you halfway, and how rarely that actually happened. The silence gives your nervous system a break. Without constant emotional ups and downs, your body starts to settle. You feel less anxious. You think more clearly. This calm allows you to see the situation without the pressure of needing an immediate response from her. You begin to understand that you were not asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. Wanting consistency, respect, and emotional presence is reasonable. The problem was not your needs. It was the imbalance in how those needs were handled. This stage is uncomfortable, but it is important. It shifts you from self-blame to self-respect. Instead of asking why you were not enough, you start asking why you accepted so little. That change in perspective is where real healing begins. The testing phase. When the silence lasts long enough, many narcissistic and emotionally indifferent women do not break it in a clear or honest way. Instead, they test from a distance. This testing is subtle on purpose. It allows her to check your emotional availability without exposing herself or taking responsibility for reconnecting. These tests often look harmless on the surface. She might view your stories regularly, like something you posted weeks ago, or send a message that has no real meaning. It feels random, almost accidental, but it is not. Each action is designed to see if you are still paying attention and still emotionally open to her. This behavior is not about fixing what was broken. There is no intention to discuss issues, apologize, or create clarity. The goal is much simpler. She wants reassurance that she still matters to you and that she can still trigger a response. It is about access, not connection. How you respond matters more than what you say. If you reply quickly, explain yourself, or show strong emotion, she learns that the door is still wide open. Once she feels secure again, she often pulls back. The distance returns because the need has already been met. If you respond calmly or take your time, something different happens. She feels unsettled. She is not used to uncertainty. She expects predictable emotional availability, not boundaries. Your steadiness disrupts the old dynamic she relied on to feel in control. This back-and-forth pattern is familiar because it keeps you emotionally reactive. You start analyzing every small interaction, wondering what it means. That confusion keeps your focus on her instead of on yourself. It drains energy and delays healing. Recognizing this testing phase is important. Once you see it clearly, it loses power. You stop assigning deep meaning to small actions. You stop reacting automatically. Instead, you choose responses based on self-respect, not on the hope that this time things will change. Time reveals the truth. As more time passes, your thinking starts to change in a noticeable way. The emotional fog that once kept you stuck slowly clears. You are no longer reacting moment by moment. You begin looking back with a calmer mindset, and that distance helps you see the situation more honestly, without constantly defending her behavior or minimizing your own experience. You start recognizing what actually drove you to stay. It was not just love. It was hope that things would improve, patience that kept you waiting, and the belief that if you stayed steady enough, she would eventually open up. You begin to understand how much effort you invested based on potential rather than reality. At the same time, her limits become harder to ignore. You see that she consistently avoided emotional depth. Conversations stayed surface level when they mattered most. Accountability was rare. When problems came up, she pulled away instead of addressing them. These were not temporary phases. They were patterns that repeated over time. This clarity can feel uncomfortable because it removes excuses. You realize that what you wanted from her was not unreasonable. Emotional presence, consistency, and effort are basic needs in any healthy connection. The issue was not your expectations. The issue was that she was unable or unwilling to meet them. For her, time brings a different experience. Without your attention, she has fewer distractions to rely on. She may fill her schedule, seek validation elsewhere, or stay busy to avoid sitting still. These things help in the short term, but they do not replace real emotional connection or resolve the underlying emptiness. Some narcissistic individuals begin to feel regret during this stage. Others feel frustration or anger, especially if they sense they lost control over you. Very few reach genuine accountability because that would require admitting fault and facing uncomfortable truths about themselves. What matters most is understanding that her internal process is not something you can influence. Waiting for her to realize your value keeps you stuck. Time reveals what was real, what was missing, and what is unlikely to change. That understanding helps you move forward with clearer boundaries and stronger self-respect. When she comes back. After enough time has passed, it is common for her to show up again. There is rarely a clear reason given. She might act friendly, casual, or even overly confident. Sometimes she behaves as if the silence never happened. This sudden return can feel confusing, especially if you spent weeks or months processing the distance and rebuilding your emotional balance. Her return is usually not about repairing the connection. There is no real discussion about what went wrong or how things could be different. What she is checking is whether she still has a place in your emotional world. She wants to know if you are still open, still responsive, and still affected by her presence. If you have done some inner work during the silence, the interaction feels different on your side. You notice that your body does not tense the same way. You are not rushing to impress or explain yourself. The excitement that once pulled you in feels weaker. You are more aware of what is missing instead of what you hope could return. Her behavior often follows the same pattern as before. Warmth appears briefly, then fades. Interest shows up, then disappears. When you recognize this early, it loses its power. You no longer read it as mystery or depth. You see it as inconsistency, because that is what it is. This moment is important because it shows your growth clearly. You are no longer reacting from longing or confusion. You are responding from awareness. You understand that someone coming back does not mean they are ready to show up differently. Seeing that clearly is progress, even if it feels bittersweet. Real power comes from understanding. Real strength does not come from cutting her off to make a point or staying silent to get a reaction. That still keeps your focus on her. Real power starts when you understand her behavior without needing to change it or explain yourself to it. You begin to accept that she avoids emotional depth because it makes her uncomfortable, not because you failed to earn it. You stop trying to communicate your needs to someone who consistently avoids hearing them. This is not giving up. It is choosing where your energy goes. Understanding also means letting go of the idea that clarity from her will bring peace. You realize that peace comes from your own decisions, not from her insight or apology. You no longer wait for her to finally see things your way. As this understanding settles in, your emotions become steadier. You are not pulled into highs and lows based on her attention. You feel more grounded in your own values and expectations. That stability makes it easier to walk away from dynamics that do not meet you halfway. This is where your focus returns to you. You make room for connections that feel consistent and respectful. You trust your instincts again. Understanding her does not tie you to her. It frees you from needing anything from her at all. What the silence does to her. When you are no longer present, the silence affects her in ways she did not expect. At first, she may brush it off and tell herself it does not matter. She might act confident on the outside and appear unaffected, but the absence removes a familiar source of attention. Without you reacting, adjusting, or showing interest, something feels off to her, even if she cannot explain it clearly. For a small number of narcissistic and emotionally indifferent women, this discomfort leads to self-reflection. This does not mean sudden change or deep accountability. It usually shows up as moments of realization, where she notices a pattern in her relationships. She may recognize that people often pull away after a while. This awareness is rare and often short-lived, but it can happen. More often, the silence pushes her toward distraction instead of reflection. She may throw herself into work, social plans, or new romantic interests. Staying busy helps her avoid sitting with uncomfortable feelings. New attention gives quick relief. It fills the gap temporarily and helps her feel wanted again without having to look inward. These distractions work for a while, but they do not solve the deeper issue. The same emotional habits show up again. The same distance, the same avoidance, the same problems in new connections. Without real self-work, the pattern repeats, even if the people involved change. What matters here is understanding that her process is not yours to manage. Waiting for her to grow or finally understand keeps you emotionally tied to her behavior. That waiting quietly pulls you back into the same role you were trying to leave behind. Your responsibility is not to monitor her healing or lack of it. Your responsibility is to protect your peace and your emotional stability. The silence gives you the chance to step out of the cycle completely. Whether she reflects or distracts, your growth does not depend on her choices. Silence is not the end. When both of you stop contacting each other, the outcome is not about who gives in first. It is about who actually changes. Silence removes the distraction of constant interaction and forces reality to show itself. Without messages or emotional tension, you finally see what the connection was giving you and what it was taking away from you. This is where self-respect starts to come back. You stop lowering your standards just to keep someone close. You stop explaining your needs to someone who keeps ignoring them. Instead of waiting for emotional safety, you begin creating it for yourself. That shift changes how you see relationships going forward. Silence also shows you that closure does not always come from a conversation. Sometimes it comes from patterns becoming clear. You see how often things went in circles. You see how many times nothing truly changed. That understanding settles the confusion and allows you to let go without needing more answers. Walking away does not mean you failed. It means you recognized that staying was costing you too much. Choosing distance can be an act of strength. It shows that you value stability, honesty, and consistency more than emotional highs, followed by long periods of doubt. This stage is not about becoming cold or closed off. It is about becoming grounded. You are no longer driven by fear of losing someone. You are guided by what feels healthy and steady. That mindset prepares you for connections that feel mutual instead of exhausting. Your life moves forward. This quiet space is not empty. It gives your mind and body a chance to reset. Without emotional stress pulling you in different directions, your nervous system starts to calm down. You think more clearly. You react less. You begin trusting your own judgment again instead of constantly questioning it. You are not losing something important. You are letting go of a dynamic that kept you anxious and unsure. That release creates room for peace. It allows you to rebuild confidence based on how you feel, not on someone else's attention or approval. You deserve communication that is clear and consistent. You deserve effort that matches your own. You deserve a connection that does not make you doubt yourself or work overtime to feel secure. Those needs are basic, not demanding. This silence is not meant to punish anyone. It is a reset that puts you back in control of your emotional life. From here, you move forward with stronger boundaries and a clearer sense of what you will and will not accept. And as always, because YouTube's algorithm tends to favor videos with strong engagement, if you feel this video has brought you value, a simple like and a quick subscribe would mean so much. It not only helps this message reach more people who need it, but also ensures you will never miss the next video that could make a difference in your journey. Thanks all